Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulihil kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. نادي الاقتصاد الإسلامي بجامعة الكويت Islamic Economics Association of the Kuwait University would like to welcome you all to this special webinar on Islamic finance, assessing performance and relevance. And this is our privilege to welcome our professor, today's guest speaker, Professor Mohammad Omar Farooq, to conduct this special webinar. So before we begin the session, let me introduce our professor, Dr. Omar Farooq, who is an associate professor at the Department of Economics and Finance at the University of Bahrain. Professor Omar Farooq earned his PhD in economics from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, USA. And he was also a postdoctoral fellow at the University of California. He taught a number of US universities for over 20 years. MashaAllah. So he served as the acting dean of Faculty of Business and Financial Sciences at Royal University for Women, Bahrain, and as the head of the Center for Islamic Finance at Bahrain Institution of Banking and Finance before joining the University of Bahrain. His primary research interests are economic development, financial institutions, history of economic thought, and Islamic economics, finance, banking, law, history, etc. He has a keen interest as well in gender economics and genocide studies, and he contributed to these areas as well. So his works, articles also have been published in Journal of Economic Issues, International Journal of Islamic and Middle Eastern Finance and Management, International Journal of Social Economics, Review of Islamic Economic, Arab Law Quarterly, and History of Economic Ideas, Journal of Islamic and Muslim Studies, and more. He also serves as an editorial board member of a number of journals. Professor Omar Farooq, his interest beyond his academic as well, he has been a prolific contributor to a broad range of Islamic issues through various Islamic media outlets as well. So this is our honor, and we are privileged to have our guest speaker, Honorable Associate Professor Dr. Mohammad Omar Farooq, today to deliver his thought, his understanding, and his philosophy on Islamic finance, his Islamic finance performance and relevance. So without further ado, let me invite Professor Omar Farooq to conduct the session. Please welcome, sir.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. My dear respected brothers and sisters who have joined today, I am privileged and honored that I have been extended invitation by Islamic Economics Association for this particular event. I am hoping that I will be making quite a few new acquaintances today. I also would like to express my appreciation to Dr. Mahiuddin for facilitating this. And I hope that the time that we spend, inshallah, it would be worthwhile for all of us, particularly for myself in making this presentation, that I will be hopefully having some questions that would also allow me to think further about some of the issues that we have to deal with from the viewpoint of Islam and so on. Before I move on, let me actually share my screen so that the PowerPoint should be visible. Let me see. Dr. Mayuddin, can you see the
Yes.
print?
Yes, sir. It's readable. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, technologically, I'm a little bit handicapped. I plan to do it on my laptop, but somehow laptop has an issue for the last couple of days. So I'm doing it from my mobile. Still, I think it should be okay. I was asked to share these the slides before the presentation today, but I thought that I will share it after if anybody has further interest in it. Before anything else, let me clarify with a disclaimer that the ideas and conceptualizations presented here are of the speaker only and do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of anyone else, including my employer, past or present. Now, there is something that I want to begin with, the kind of inconvenient distraction. I will come to the topic shortly. Hopefully, the distraction would not be too much of a distraction. Hopefully, it will fit in what I'm going to present today. Some of you might be familiar with a site called Worldometer, where life statistics are cumulatively updated on a real-time basis. And as you know that as human beings, we come to this world and also we leave world, many of us every day. And quite interestingly, we are already around the noon time in Bahrain, and about 81,000 people have died today for various reasons. That's normal. People are being born, people are actually dying. But one particular statistics that I would like to put it in perspective today, that I hope it will fit into my presentation, is that just today, among the people who died of hunger, who did not get any food, or just had been victim of famines or war or things that deprived them of food, it's already about 15,500 today. And on a daily basis, it averages in such a way that if I speak for 1 hour today, during that 1 hour, on average, about 1,000 plus people will die just because of hunger. Well, these people could be from Ethiopia, could be from Yemen, could be from Syria, or could be some other places in some part of the world where a vulture, probably you have seen probably that iconic picture that a vulture is actually waiting for when his prey or his lunch will be ready, because he's just waiting for that child to die so that the vulture can have his own meal. Now, I will come back toward the end and see how many people have actually died on average during this 1 hour. But I want to put this in perspective because although these pictures are disturbing, I want to assure you that we don't have to be feeling too uncomfortable because we don't know them. They are not close to us, at least to me, and I'm pretty sure that they are not close to you. So we don't have to be feeling too much discomfort. And they are probably people that we don't even know. Unfortunately, this is some of the reality that we face in the world, but also the faces of exploitation around the world. If you look at some of these pictures, a 3-4-year child bearing those bricks, those toddlers who are working in a shoe factory, those women who are victims of trafficking, human trafficking, those migrant laborers whose shelter is such that in some of these Middle Eastern countries, they do not have proper accommodation, even though they are building and contributing toward the growth and development of many of these countries. or in some other parts of Asia where children are looking for their food in dumpsters. These are phases of exploitation, zulm from Islamic viewpoint. And I want to keep this in perspective as I make this presentation, and hopefully you will find that this is not a distraction. I will come back to this later on. As far as Islamic finance is concerned, most of us are familiar with that formally with the first Islamic bank, Dubai Islamic Bank in 1975, that the Islamic finance movement and industry, it has now come a long way. It is now globally recognized, operating in so many countries, and it has grown so much over the past few decades and is expected to continue to register further growth. There is pent-up demand in the Muslim world for Islamic finance. We should also acknowledge the contribution of so many dedicated and innovative people behind this progress and achievement. However, in this presentation, I will make an attempt to step back a little bit to explore the performance and relevance of the industry from a somewhat different perspective. Now, what is Islamic finance? And I want to put Islamic in highlight. It is important that we do not define it mechanically, because the word Islamic or the label Islamic is a comprehensive and holistic term. To be Islamic, it must measure up to the relevant expectation, and it cannot be merely prohibition driven, meaning that focusing only avoidance of prohibition. We all know that Islam has certain prohibitions, but Islam is not all about prohibitions. There are other positive aspects in our life that we must achieve, that we must pursue. In addition to adhering to the prohibitions, achievement of broader goals, Maqasid al-Islam, must be addressed. As far as I am concerned, my humble preference is that finance based on Islamic values and parameters is what we should be looking for, or alternative branding, so that the term Islamic is not compromised or diluted. Simply focusing on prohibition is not enough to earn the label Islamic. I would like to humbly submit that, and inshallah, we will try to illustrate that point or elaborate on that point. So about the prevalent story and assessment in Islamic finance, we primarily talk about the size of the industry, how many countries where this is being spread, what is the growth rate, how many different types of product that offer so much flexibility to the market, rate of return, whether they are matching or even better than the conventional counterpart, the gala events in the five-star hotels and facilities. Well, to me, as a human being, as a Muslim, as a social scientist, the story should not be, or at least it's not about the how many $1 trillion the size of the Islamic finance industry, in how many countries there is presence of Islamic finance, what is the growth rate of Islamic finance industry, however impressive it is, how many different types of products the industry offers, whether the rate of return matches or even beats the industry's conventional counterpart. Actually, in all these areas, the industry is a grand success. So there is no issue in all these areas. The industry has proven to be a notable success, and in all likelihood, such success will continue in foreseeable future. So this is currently what we see when we open the journals and the books, that we are talking about these issues, and we measure, evaluate, assess Islamic finance and the relevance of it in terms of these measurements. In my presentation, let me begin with a few premises from the Quranic perspective. The first one being, to me, what is the humanity orientation of Islam? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Kuntum khaira ummatin ukhrijat linnas. Due to time factor, I would not be reading the entire verse. You are the best of people, evolved for mankind, for humanity. We are ukhrijat linnas. This is not to dominate them. This is not to subdue them. This is not to subjugate them. In my understanding, it is to serve them lead them in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, this humanity orientation requires that our consciousness, awareness, thinking, action keeps in mind that we are actually ukhrijat linnas. Hopefully, throughout this presentation, I will try to make that clear from my perspective. Second premise is the fairness, justice. In Surah An-Nisa 135, where it is mentioned, O you who believe, stand out firmly for justice or fairness as witnesses to God, even as against yourselves, or your parents, or your kin, and whether it be against rich or poor, for Allah can best protect both. Whatever we do from Islamic viewpoint, it is to uphold, it is to practice the principle and the value of fairness and justice. That is the legacy of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. That is the legacy of Khulafai Rashidin, radiallahu anhum, and this is something that we must uphold. And a vision for a zulum-free world. As we all know that riba is categorically haram, no issue in regard to that. But one of the underlying principles is that deal not unjustly and you shall not be dealt with unjustly. La tazlimuna wa la tuzlamun. This is a vision for, this is laying out a vision for a zulum-free world. And I want to also be clear about this, that it is important that we seek a riba-free world because it is categorically prohibited. But if we do not understand and apply our understanding of riba in an appropriate way, we might have a riba-free world, but not necessarily zulum-free world. And this is something that I hope we should be aware of and take into consideration in terms of our thinking. Now, I have a zip file here, road and the roadside. Why do we build roads? Well, we build roads so that we can move from place to place. We build roads because we want to reach certain destination in a comfortable and proper way. The reason I bring this up is because sometimes we can get so distracted that, as you know, that roads also have roadsides. And if you look at the right video on the right side, that there is a white marker. That's basically indicating that we should not be crossing those lines while we are driving. To me, those are the prohibitions, because moving on the road, driving on the road requires safety precautions and also danger. And to me, everything that has been prohibited to us is actually dangerous for our salvation. It is bad for our things in life. So those markers there that shows us that we should not be deviating from are the prohibitions to me. But prohibitions are like roadside. They are markers that we should keep in mind. But actual story is not the prohibition or the roadside. The main story is the road, not the roadside. The main story is the movement, not just being on the road. We can be on the road, but just because being on the road is not the purpose of the road. The main story is the destination, not just driving or moving. The importance of this is that we can be on the road, we can be driving, but that does not take us to any specific destination unless we are absolutely conscious about it and we are trying to reach that destination. So our driving is mapped out. So just being on the road and avoiding the roadside does not take us to particular goals that we want to achieve. Now, I do not know whether you would agree with this characterization of prohibition and the main story, but to me, somehow we are getting distracted by the prohibition by focusing on the prohibition, while we should be focusing on the road and the destination. That brings us the different perspective I wanted to present from, and that is based on the goal orientation and problem solving. And by the way, throughout this presentation, I will be referring to a number of works that have been published. If there is no author name mentioned, it is because those are probably published by me. If there are other authors or works that I have mentioned here as a resource, those are with specific author information. So most of these things that I'm speaking about today, I probably have written about, and I invite you to explore these if you find those interesting or stimulating from thought perspective. When I say goal orientation, if we want to reach our destination, that we need to have goals. We cannot be simply just driving and expecting that we'll be reaching somewhere meaningful. We know that our goal ultimately as Muslims, as believers, that we want to have salvation in the life hereafter. And in this dunya as well, world as well, we need to have certain things that we want to achieve. And also, whatever we do, we should be doing it in a problem-solving manner. And by that problem-solving manner, I mean that we must set our goals on specific problems to address, and our assessment should be also whether we are succeeding in solving or addressing those problems. What are some of the problems and challenges? I would like to step back for a moment, because we know that Islamic finance so far has been profoundly successful in regard to the measures that we have already mentioned, that we usually talk about. But just let us step back for a few moments, that apart from what we are preoccupied with from Islamic finance viewpoint, these are some of our problems and challenges that we have to address. Poverty and deprivation of basic needs, exploitation and injustice, inequality and concentration of wealth, corruption and bad governance, ecological imbalances threatening our existence, and systemic misalignments. Let me briefly elaborate. Because of the time constraint, I would not be able to get into a lot of details, but hopefully there will be enough indications to provoke some thought, inshallah. Now, grounded in relevant economic system, the story that we should have is basically, as we seek the hasana of this dunya and also hasana of akhirah, in this dunya, we would like to have sustainable shared prosperity. To me, anything that is Islamic, from economic viewpoint, financial viewpoint, must be properly interfaced with the notion and measurement of sustainable shared prosperity. If we do not achieve that, then basically the hasana of this dunya, except at the personal level with our pious life, as far as the dunya where we have to run our life effectively, efficiently, it is important that we have that sustainable shared prosperity. But this is not just a secular issue. In this life, life will move on, life will have its course, we will try to fulfill our needs in this world. But for us, it is not just the hasana of dunya, but also hasana of akhirah, and they must be properly aligned. So whatever we achieve in this world, including sustainable shared prosperity, for us, it must be based on Islamic beliefs, values, and parameters that can lead to salvation. This is the real story. And everything that we do, whether from economic viewpoint, financial viewpoint, educational viewpoint, cultural viewpoint, environmental viewpoint, all of them must be properly mapped out to this story, because that's the story of our life, or that's what it should be. Now, I would like to point out that one of the things that often clouds our thinking is what, in my view or understanding, is called legalism. And that is basically understanding everything in terms of law, turning everything into a legal issue. We all need law. We are human society. Without law, it cannot function properly. But having law and legal system and legalism, there is a difference there, which also I would illustrate. And there is a book that is covered that you see, Toward Our Reformation, From Legalism to Value-Oriented Islamic Law and Jurisprudence. Much of the ideas that I'm presenting today are anchored in that book. So I invite you to read it. Hopefully you will find it stimulating and relevant. Legalism impacted Islamic finance by shaping it as prohibition-driven, where the focus is on avoiding prohibition without due or parallel focus on achieving the maqasid, Islamic values, principles, and norms. A shift from legalism to value orientation would imply engaging finance to achieve positive socioeconomic goals and pursuits. So not just a few mechanical KPIs, but also we want to see that these are tied to some broader goals in life. This also requires that we need to move from prohibition orientation to maqasid orientation and value orientation. According to anything to be sufficiently Islamic, it must be value driven. Our understanding and praxis of Islam is often mired in legalism, literalism, and formalism at the expense of substance and spirit. This calls for value orientation as enunciated in my book. So parallel or complementary progress on the substance front would require accepting maqasid, broader objectives behind Islamic guidance or commandments, as the starting point, first to study the problems, relevant problems, and then devise solutions. Also, maqasid, too broad and vague at the highest level, must be operationalized through appropriate KPIs for measurable progress. Sometimes we talk about the maqasid, but they are so vague and general that we cannot measure whether we are actually achieving those goals or not. So that book that I have mentioned, and another work that I also invite draw your attention to, a co-authored paper in Search of the Sharia, published in Arab Law Quarterly, and you might find it thought-provoking to read the book. Some of the implication of what is presented there would be reflected in presentation today. Now let's take a look at the systems and subsystems. We have at the broader level the society. As part of that, we have economic system. As part of the economic system, we have financial system. And as part of the financial system, we have financial institutions. Contemporary Islamic finance, in my humble understanding, is handicapped, constrained due to the focus primarily on the level of financial institutions and even more importantly, at the transaction level. We do not really have a proper and well-developed financial system from Islamic viewpoint. We operate in a dual banking system where we are competing just to match the benchmark set by the conventional institutions. We're not giving them a genuine competition from Islamic viewpoint. We do not have an economic system within which an Islamic financial system is embedded, and at the society level, the situation probably is similar. I recommend a reading resource. Just last year, the paper was published by me, Islamic Finance, Eclipsing Islamic Economics, Causes and Consequences. Now, about those problems, challenges that I mentioned, now let me also draw attention to some of our aspirations. For poverty and deprivation of basic needs, we need to have fulfillment of basic needs. For exploitation and injustice, we need to work for a zulum-free world. Inequality and concentration of wealth, for that we need shared prosperity with human dignity and improved quality of life. We do not want to see that kind of situation where a 4-year child is carrying bricks in the brick field, or they're looking for food in the dumpster, or they're dying from hunger. Corruption and bad governance, of course, we need good and transparent governance. Ecological imbalances threatening our existence, we need sustainable development and what some of the people are calling now a new model of circular economy. And systemic misalignments, for example, dominance of capital and finance, we need to have a people-centered approach in a real economy framework. Actually, each of these could be a topic in itself if we want to explore, but I am just laying out a few things as a food for thought if you find that those resonate with our understanding and concerns that we might actually share. Now, having said these things, let's take a look at each of these briefly. Poverty and lack of fulfillment of basic needs. We know poverty is persistent and widespread. The problem is not a mystery. The real constraint is our will to confront it head on. We have not taken removal or elimination of poverty as a national or international target in a committed way. From Islamic viewpoint, we often overemphasize charity resources. Charity resources are supplementary and they are essential for any healthy society to take care of those who are left out in the ordinary process of life. The main path to elimination of poverty is not charity, but normal economic development, where you create jobs, create income opportunities, people get educated, and they basically rise out of poverty and enjoy the basic fulfillment of the basic needs. If we ask ourselves, is Islamic finance industry duly aligned and interfaced with this broader goal? It is important to understand that not all of these are on the shoulder of Islamic finance. It will not be fair to deal with this in such a way that as if all these can be solved by Islamic finance industry itself. But the point is that we need to understand that interfacing and mapping, because as the providers of finance from Islamic viewpoint, there is a key role to play. And whether that role is being played or not, that is an issue. Again, two reading recommendations: Challenge of Poverty and the Poverty of Islamic Economics, and also Challenge of Poverty and Mapping Out Solutions, requisite paradigm shift from a problem-solving and Islamic perspective. Exploitation and injustice. As human beings and Muslims, we can't be insensitive about or oblivious to the challenge of exploitation and injustice. Our humanity orientation, principle of justice, and the vision of a dhulm-free world require a fundamental transformation in our thinking and approach. Also important is understanding the contemporary nature and framework of exploitation or dhulm, because this is not like 400 years ago or 1,000 years ago. The way people are exploited in a commercial environment may have taken a different framework or a different kind of structure, which is important to understand in contemporary context. Whether in distribution of profit or paying wages, we are not much different. We have embraced and learned the art of competitive benchmarking. We just want to be like the conventional counterpart, not much better than them. Instead of benchmarking, can we give the conventional counterpart a real competition based on a better and more compelling value proposition? Can actually our depositors earn higher return with lower risk? Can actually the people who seek finance can get it at a better rate and also at a better risk? That would be a more compelling value proposition, and people would be turned into Islamic finance not because they just want to go to heaven, we all want to, but also because in this dunya there is a better value that is being proposed and offered by the industry. Again, some reading recommendations: Exploitation, Profit, and the Riba interest reductionism, and also rent-seeking behavior and dhulm beyond riba interest equation. If we want to understand exploitation, dhulm, injustice on the economic front from contemporary perspective, then I invite you to explore these ideas in light of the two papers mentioned here. Also, inequality and concentration of wealth. An Islamic economy is basically an economy based on shared prosperity within Islamic parameters. Yes, there will be no riba. Yes, there will be zakah and other resources, but the way we measure Islamicity is whether actually there is shared sustainable prosperity or not. Of course, those would be with the parameters as I have just mentioned. The contemporary world cannot overcome poverty and lack of fulfillment of basic needs or exploitation and injustice without addressing the power and hold of the rich, individuals and businesses. And this is important to understand that many of those phases of exploitation, that picture we saw, these are global commercial enterprises that exploit the labor for their need without actually sharing the wealth and resources so that these people actually can fulfill their basic needs. There are, as you know, that 1% people who are rich, they control almost 60% of the global wealth. And there are consequences of that, because this is almost kind of a growth that is not good for humanity, that actually affects the kind of deprivation, the kind of challenges that we face for the rest of the humanity. There are structural issues which cannot be merely addressed through philanthropy and charity. There are a lot of these rich billionaires who want to spend money in philanthropy, and we also want to do charity work. Those are beneficial, those are appreciated. But when there are structural issues, you will have this philanthropy and charity, but poverty is not going to be reduced or eliminated. People still will be dying from hunger. These things need to be understood from structural perspective. Even redistributive policies would fall inadequate, and the distribution from production, if it is not properly addressed, then structurally will continue to face similar kind of problem. In the Quran, in Surah Al-Hashr, verse number 7, where it talks about, so that wealth may not merely circulate among your rich. This is a very important principle from Islamic viewpoint. Unfortunately, we rarely talk about it. Why so few people control so much wealth and control our life, and what can be done about it? We really have not paid attention. But in recent time, in modern economic discourse, one of the issues that have basically has been pushed to the forefront is the issue of inequality and concentration of wealth. And several Nobel laureates in economics and others have shown through their research that actually the inequality and concentration of wealth is one of the fundamental problems affecting the stability and the standard of living and many other major problems, fundamental problems that we face. If we ask ourselves, this verse is also from the Quran and of profound significance. What really have we done to benefit from and fulfill its implications? Once again, I invite you to read two papers, Hoarding versus Circulation of Wealth from Perspective of Maqasid al-Sharia, and Inequality, Concentration of Wealth, and the Ownership Structure of Islamic Banks, Some Pertinent Issues. Corruption and bad governance. Many countries that have developed have tackled the problem of corruption largely by embracing and upholding good governance. I hope you are all aware of the Transparency International's corruption perception ranking. And it is just unfortunate that Muslim majority countries rank near the top, or near the top half of that ranking, that will really have very bad governance and very corrupt type of governance. Good governance involves responsibility of governments and governing bodies to meet the needs of the masses, as opposed to select groups in society. In case of the Muslim world, this also means serving its people rather than any external interests. Harvesting the relevant benefits of Islamic finance needs good governance in our societies, which are currently in a rather deplorable shape. If you are not familiar, I invite you to familiarize yourself with the Islamicity Index. How do we identify what is Islamic and not Islamic? And some of the work that have been shown that if we take the KPIs of Islamicity, we'll find that many of the Western governments actually are more Islamic than many of the Muslim majority countries. Ecological imbalances threatening our existence. Well, all the theories we talk about, all the frustrations, all the struggles that we might have, this ecological imbalance, the climate crisis, this is an existential threat. If this planet is not going to be there in a functional way, in a sustainable way, then probably all of our problems would be solved, because there is no problem to solve anymore. If we cannot preserve the planet and have a sustainable living until, of course, the doomsday, then different ideologies, different banking systems, different alternatives down the road would not matter. That's why I think we should think more in the line of circular economy, with 3 zeros. We want to have zero poverty, zero unemployment, zero net carbon emissions. And some of the works in this regard, I invite you to read. Most of you probably know Dr. Muhammad Yunus, whose book, A World of 3 Zeros, you should be familiar with. And one of the works that we have done with one of my colleagues, issues in endogenizing relevant systematic risk in Islamic sustainable finance. It just came out earlier this year. Systemic misalignments. Contemporary world is dominated by the capitalist system, while its competing alternative, socialist system, remains a demonstrated failure. There are many positive aspects of capitalism that are also shared by Islam. However, if you look at the term capitalism, it is basically all about capital. It has some fundamental rough edges that in itself is contributing to a number of key challenges identified here. Most importantly, capitalism is about capital, and those who own and control it generally and the most of it. This, in fact, should be a human story, a story about the dynamics of human and other factors of production, while keeping humans at the center. Human beings can't and should not be just a or competing factor of production. The story should actually put human beings at the center. And from Islamic viewpoint, I believe that we have a responsibility and opportunity to put that in a compelling way so that the humanity, Ukhrijat nas, they are able to see what it actually should be. Now, critiquing capitalism is not an endorsement of socialism. Islam does have a better, balanced, more robust, and holistic guidance and solution. Unfortunately, that is yet to be articulated in modern time or put in practice as a demonstrated model. Again, some of the resources you probably come across Arundhati Ray's Capitalism, a Ghost Story. And just recently, we have come up with a paper. If this paper you are interested in, you have to contact us separately because it is in the pre-publication stage. Conscious Capitalism and Islam, Convergence and Divergence. Now, another thing that we should be careful about within the context of systemic misalignment, within capitalism, financial capitalism is playing a much worse role as it is manifesting through increased financialization of the economy. It is creating a disconnect between the financial monetary economy and the real economy. In the current practice, we talk about Islamic finance as asset linked, whether asset-based or asset-backed, which is inadequate to properly understand and conceptualize the real economy and appreciate its role. The role of finance in an economy must be properly understood. Finance should be for greasing the wheel. The wheel itself we need to focus on. Finance is not the purpose and goal. Finance is the means to achieve those goals. Merely focusing on the Sharia compliant Islamic finance would not take us to the desired destination where the main economic challenges would be solved or aspirations achieved. Once again, a reading recommendation. I co-authored it with Dr. Salim, Conceptualization of the Real Economy and Islamic Finance, Transformation Beyond the Asset Link Rhetoric. Now let's return to that distraction we had. So how many people died today due to hunger? Well, it seems that another few thousand, about 1,200 has died since I have been speaking. The clock is updated on an average basis real time. But thing is that why should we care? Those faces that we saw, those people who are dying of hunger or those who are facing exploitation, why should we care? I don't know them. They are not relatives of us or friends of us or our community members. Well, this is where the difference between Sharia compliance and what I call Islam compliance. There is nothing actually in the Sharia that pushes us that we have to do something about it. But we learn from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He is not a believer whose stomach is filled while the neighbor to his side goes hungry. Well, that also depends on our perspective. Is our neighborhood within the 1,000 years or meters around our home, or is this planet our neighborhood? When somebody dies somewhere due to hunger, who is responsible? We learn from, for example, the example of Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliph, that apparently he stated that even an animal that dies of thirst on the bank of Euphrates, he feels that he would be responsible because it is under his jurisdiction. So when we talk about Sharia compliance, which is a very important aspect of being Islamic, because we have to avoid those prohibitions, but simply focusing on Sharia compliance actually somehow blindsides us from the broader values and norms of Islam. And look at this Sharia compliance and Islam compliance. The distinction is fundamentally important. You see an image of a beautiful yacht, and I don't know if you're familiar with the story of it, but this is the case of Nabila. Now, where does the Nabila come from? You need to read the story. I have provided the link. And basically, this is a very luxurious yacht. Apparently, $35 million was spent on the exterior of it, and $50 million were spent in the interior. This 5-story yacht, it's a fascinating story that it was built at the order of one of the richest arms dealers in the world, and then it ended up with the ownership of one of the sultans in the Muslim world, and then ultimately it was purchased by Donald Trump. Well, there is a long more story to this, but if we simply want from Sharia compliance, then let's consider how many Sharia compliant ways or modes can be applied to financing the purchase of this yacht or constructing one like this. Well, we can consider murabaha, we can consider, for example, ijara, we can consider different ways of musharaka or securitization and so on. But what is important here, or even if we want to build it, construct it, we have istisna, but that actually leaves the larger picture in the open. That is that all Sharia compliance about? Is that what Islam teaches us, that how do we come up with the transaction modes where it can be Sharia compliant? Should this kind of yacht be built? The people who build it, actually, it is important to understand that this is not the life of the Prophet. In the case of life of the Prophet, we find that if he knew anyone hungry, then he would not eat until that hunger has been fulfilled. That's the legacy of Islam. That's Islam compliance. And we need to move beyond Sharia compliance. As I again emphasize, Sharia compliance is important, but we need to have the larger picture. So Islamic finance endogenized to an Islamic economy would mean sustainable shared prosperity within Islamic parameters. Islamic beyond Sharia compliance, the Islamic brand must be based on Uswatun Hasana, the model for us, Prophet Muhammad, his life, embracing our individual and collective responsibility. So, is it a distraction, or is this merely nostalgia, thinking about that Islam has much more to offer than just focusing on the prohibitions? Can Islamic finance be properly interfaced in an economy of shared prosperity within Islamic parameters to address the challenges Muslims and the humanity face? I firmly believe we can. When guided by our faith and aspirations, we harness our talent, energy, resource, and passion in the path of Allah, anything is possible. And those aspirations do not have to remain as distractions. In the Quran, it is mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah 148, to each is a goal to which Allah turns him. Then strive together as in a race towards all that is good. Wheresoever you are, Allah will bring you together, for Allah has power over all things. Some of us are economists, some are accountants, some are engineers, some are doctors, some are politicians, some are social workers, some are nurses, some are just labor, some are just ordinary people. Wherever we are, whatever we are, we all have a responsibility to keep those destinations in front of us, find out how we can contribute toward that together. This is not something entirely on the shoulder of Islamic finance, but Islamic finance can do a lot more than what it is currently doing. And that's one of the things that I wanted to focus on. I hope that you would not find this presentation a waste. I hope that you will explore some of the resources that I have recommended. And I hope that Allah forgives me if I have said something erroneously, and also bless anything that I may have said correctly. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Umar. MashaAllah, that was a very brilliant assessment and presentation, and also your thought along with the recommendation and how you brought with some your thoughts and the solutions from the Islamic and Quran perspective from the practice of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as well. So, I hope and I believe that all participants learn some new thoughts and new philosophy from your presentation. Alhamdulillah. So I open the session for question and answers. Questions from the participants. If you have some questions, either you may write in question and answer sections you have here, or you may raise your hand and we will switch on the microphone for you. So, anyone would like to ask or needs any explanation, more clarification, or to add new concept, new ideas, please welcome. You may raise your hand or you may write in the question and answer sections. So we hear two participants already raised their hand. I switch on for Mr. Mohammad Dulal Mia. Please, Mr. Mohammad Dulal Mia, welcome, and you may present your thought or you may ask. Professor.
Assalamu alaikum. Do you hear me?
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, thank you very much for your wonderful and insightful presentation. There are many realistic things and very understandable way of the presentation. My simple question is actually these all things are actually the known to some extent to the implementers, but still we see there is a lack of implementation of these concepts from the workable level. So why do you think that we should start it? I mean, which level of implementation, who will start the implementation of this Sharia issue? And you have said that in practicality. So that is my question.
Thank you, Dr. Dural Mia, for this question. Actually, this is a question that I also struggle with. And one of the things I think is a conceptualization problem. And by that, I mean that by simply focusing on prohibition, we think that we are already achieving what we need to achieve. So change actually comes from a sense of dissatisfaction. Change comes from realizing that we have things more to do. If we are already happy with that we have halal that we need, if we think that we already have what we desire, then why think about broader changes? So there is a conceptualization problem, that we don't realize there is serious deficiency in regard to the way we think and assess what we are doing. This should not take away the value of what we are doing, because this is important contribution and achievement, what we have done. But this is like looking backward, that how far we have come, and looking forward, how far we have to go. So that's one thing. Second thing, and again, I invite you to read the paper on Islamic finance eclipsing Islamic economics, causes and consequences. It started with actually impetus for Islamic economics. The discourse was about Islamic economics. And Islamic finance, Islamic banking was just supposed to be a part of it. But once our anti-colonialism movement, our independence movement brought independence to most of the Muslim majority countries, it seemed that founding or establishing an Islamic economy was out of the question, because it actually impinges on the power of a lot of rich and powerful people. So the agenda of Islamic economics, agenda of Islamic economy was largely abandoned. And it was much easier to focus on the institutional level. And just we're happy with that we have a place in the dual banking system where we can perform just as good as the conventional banking. So it is important to understand the current power structure, both in terms of the political power and the economic power, are concentrated in the hands who really do not want an Islamic economy. So if we want it, we need to raise awareness about it, and wherever we can, spread the message that just like social changes can occur, transformations of society can occur, and that's actually the story of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is the story of the Quran, how it revolutionizes the society. So we need to believe in that again. It is possible. It can be. The message is there. The model is there. It is the will. It is the networking. It is coming together in a purposive way, in a goal-oriented way. And it may not happen next decade. It may not even happen within the half century. But if the awareness begins, if we start working in that direction, as I mentioned, just driving on the road is not the story. Where are we going? We need to understand and map out that how do we go there. So I do not have too much a specific answer, but this is something that is more of a conceptualization problem and realizing that there are serious constraints in moving in that direction, but it is possible to overcome, and we must try.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your wonderful answer and explanation, and also identifying some problems in this regard. So let's listen to Brother Abdul Fattah. So, Brother Abdul Fattah, welcome, brother. You may ask your question, or if you would like to add something to this session. Brother Abdul Fattah.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Firstly, I just want to appreciate our Prof for what he has done. In fact, if I missed this session, I wouldn't know what I've missed in my life, because there are a lot of hints he has put on board that had made me realize many things. I just want to make a clarification between the economic society and the financial system. I mean, economic system and financial system. I am taking the two to be one. Can you please expatiate more so that we'll be able to understand the differences between the economic society and the financial system?
There was a little bit of background noise. Dr. Mahiuddin, did you hear the question clearly?
Yes, yes. I think he would like to know the difference between the economic system and financial system.
Yes.
Well, if you go back to the diagram that I just showed, that an economic system is a much larger scope comparison to the financial system. A financial system is actually a smaller set of the economic system. But there is another aspect that is important to understand, that when we talk about finance, it primarily stems from the fact that there are some people who have surplus and there are some people who have deficit. So in that regard, financial system somehow helps us mobilize and utilize those resources. But the actual utilization, where are we going to utilize, how we are going to utilize, those are actually part of economic system. Think about, in Islamic finance, we have financing of trading activities. But before we can trade, we must have production. If we do not actually have sufficient production, then what are we going to trade? Unfortunately, and again, I have some papers that you should look at, that we often focus on things that are less risky. Production, manufacturing, agriculture, these are risky areas to deal with. And that's why, unfortunately, as much as we talk about risk sharing, we often are in the risk avoidance mode. We do not invest in areas where actually there could be more jobs created, more income generation can occur, more entrepreneurial activities. And in that regard, that is part of the real economy. So basically, financial system is part of an economic system. And I have pointed out that in understanding the economic system, we should first understand the real economy, where the actual economic activities take place. Finance is a part of the story to grease the wheel. The wheel is the real economy. Finance is to facilitate it. If we do not somehow recognize that or understand that, then we will be putting the cart before the horse, and we might be continuing these activities while not just in the Islamic finance, in the conventional world as well, we are realizing that due to the effect of financialization, finance is actually becoming more dominant player without parallel development in the real economy. And that is why, even after this crisis that occurred in 2008, look at the recovery. It is now well acknowledged that the stock market recovery that we see is not reflective of the underlying real economy's recovery. And that's why things even remain so shaky. So I hope that we will think in terms of the real economy as part of the economic system, and then how finance actually is providing the wheel, the grease for that wheel. In that case, finance can be more effective. If our focus becomes finance, then we get distracted from the real economy, and it can cause a lot of dislocations.
Thank you very much, Prof. There's another.
I'm from Nigeria, right? And all the books that you've highlighted that we should read for further reading. Can we get the soft copy of the book, sir?
I cannot talk about the book, but the papers are available, and I have provided the link already. So
I mean, the one the lecturers have highlighted, the one presenting his lecture.
If you just get the copy of the PowerPoint presentation, you will get the link.
Okay. Good, sir. Okay, thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Brother Abdul Fattah, and thank you, Prof. Prof, Brother Zakaria asked,
there is a little bit of background noise.
Yeah,
Is
okay.
Okay, all right.
Why does Islamic finance is still far from the spirit of Sharia?
No, I would not put it that way, because prohibition is an important part that we have to pay attention to. And the thing is that starting from the prohibition is a little bit of problematic. And I hope that you will keep that image of the road and roadside in mind. As you know that our own human history that goes back to Adam and Hawa, well, they were created as part of the Khalifa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them. He placed them in Jannah and just put one prohibition, just one prohibition. Rest of things were halal for them. And they still somehow had to get into that. And now we are in this world. We have to now try to get back to our eternal home. The point is that we also have to have conceptually clear about what do we mean by Sharia. And I do not want to get into the details and spoil your reading, but I really invite you to read the paper In Search of the Sharia, so that the very notion of Sharia, the legalism underlying it, and the way it somehow shapes our mind, that actually takes away focus from the problem solving and the goal-oriented side. I hope that if you read this, it would be difficult to explain here briefly, So my invitation is actually that it might be a little bit shocking for some of you because you might not have thought about it in the same way, but at least give it a try and see if it actually resonates with your own thinking and so on. So I recommend that you read that paper, inshallah.
Thank you, Prof. We do have now about 130 participants in Zoom. So I would like to ask and request participants if you have any questions, any ideas that you would like to clarify from the Prof. I think this is a very good opportunity for you all, as we do have Prof is very experienced and skilled, who is very professional, and his ideas and thought are always appreciating by the scholars and also professionals. So this is our very good opportunity for you all. If you have any questions and or anything that you need clarification, you may ask. We do have sometimes as well. So let's listen to Brother Nasir Muhammad Mashri. Brother Nasir, yes, welcome. You may ask your question.
Yes,
Brother
sir.
Nasir.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dr. Muhammad, thank you very much for your information. I have a question. Do we really have an economic system in the Arab world or Muslim world? The two systems, the man-made system and the Islamic system. As far as I know, we are just a bunch of followers. We don't have an economy that we are masters in it. We are legalizing the non-Sharia profits. Like, we know that this is haram. You cannot make profit out of, money that you did not earn or you did not sweat for it. But still, we are legalizing riba, and by law, you must pay it. At the same time, we as Muslims claim that we are respecting our own religion, but we don't, push towards the Islamic financial system. While we are going for the financial or the Islamic financial system, we are having another problem, that we don't have some kind of a system that will solve our own problems. Till now, we as Muslims are facing so many things, like financing our own housing system, or our medical system, or our own educational system. If you think, or if you see what's going on in the Arab world or the Muslim world, even though that they have the two systems, the man-made system, they are still suffering. And if they claim that they are good Muslims, they are not practicing what they preach. So the contradiction between what we believe in and what we practice is something that is really confusing me after all of these years. I'm looking for a system that, even though that you cannot deny the importance of the Europeans, the Americans, the Chinese, and so on, and the influence of the dollar on the oil production and the international trade. Till now, we don't have our own system. We are just slaves, followers of that system. At the same time, while we are talking about the glory of Islam and the glory of the Islamic financing system, we don't practice it. I see it maybe in Europe, especially in Britain, more than the Arab world. I need you to shed your light a little bit on the problem that we are facing as Arabs and Muslims between what we believe in and what we practice. Thank you very much.
That's a very insightful question and a little bit provocative too. In a sense, I could not agree with you more. We currently do not have any system. And part of the reason is that basically the entire Muslim world is somewhat disoriented. coming out of the colonial period or in the post-colonial period, I am not sure that we really are independent in many sense. Our dependence on the West is so total that basically we look for everything from them, and we get excited with whatever they come up with. So if we have a pandemic and we need vaccine, we want to wait for them to come up with the vaccine so that we could be saved. And if they introduce something and come up with new like Bitcoin, and then we get excited about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as if that's going to solve our problem. So currently, our emotion and intellect are too much bound to others, while actually we should be thinking more in terms of the problems that need to be addressed and how Islam can actually guide us. Now, when we think about system, it is important to understand that system at the systemic level, there might not be distinctively lot of difference. So for example, when we talk about capitalism and socialism, there are some aspects where Islam can be found similar to some of the aspirations in socialism and also a lot in capitalism. However, it is not the issue of those features or characteristics, it's how those are balanced. And as you already know, that Islam also emphasizes the balance in life and avoiding extremities. So for example, if pure capitalism emphasizes overwhelmingly the private property, and it's right, and somehow reduce the role of public sector, while in socialism, the other extreme, that everything is under the public sector or under the ownership of governance, Islam actually provides a balance in this regard. So my point is that, first of all, as you have said, we do not currently have a system that actually, in a system where we are the masters of our own fate. And that's why I have referred to the power, both economic and political power, are concentrated in the hands that actually are not quite keen in addressing the challenges and the problems that I have identified. We will be having tall things in our societies. We will be having nice highways. We will be enjoying the amenities of life, but in many respects, we will be missing out the fundamental things that still have to be addressed. So in concurring with your feeling, yes, currently we do not have a system, and that's another thing that until we recognize these deficiencies, we would not be able to work for it. Currently, we don't even feel for it, that there is a deficiency and that needs to be addressed. Right now, things are quite Sharia compliant, things are going in the right direction, we're having halal things, we're building halal economy. Well, the way we are doing it, just halal cosmetics and halal food, still does not address the health issues. It does not address the issues who our basic needs are not being fulfilled and so on. So we need to change our orientation. We need to focus on what we really want to achieve. And the reason I do not want to get into the details of Islamic economy other than we want to have shared sustainable prosperity, because we can have a lot of things in life, but if it is not shared properly, then it does not meet the aspiration of what would be Islamic. So going back to the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he would not eat, his family would not eat if they would know that someone in the neighborhood is going hungry. That's the model. That's Islamic. That's Islam compliance. Once we reduce to the legalistic definition, then we will have Sharia compliance, but many of those larger things would be remaining unaddressed and more like a distractions. And some might even consider that to be a kind of nuisance because it takes away the good feeling that we are on the right track.
So I'm sorry. Thank you very much for your information that you are providing us with. But I'm still confused. You know, I lived most of my life outside Kuwait. And from what I have seen, there is a Muslim who is abiding the law of the country. He is a tax taxpayer. He follows the law to the finite point here. But in the same time, while we are talking with him about that he should pay zakat or he should make waqf and so on, they elaborate a lot and they come with different solutions, different defenses and so on. But he cannot do anything or talk about the taxation system. I'm not sure why are we doing something like this. If we satisfy the requirements of the law, why don't we satisfy the requirements of the God who created us and gave us the health and the money to enjoy? While we are doing it, I'm seeing some hypocrisy between what we believe in and what we practice.
It is not a little hypocrisy. This is actually a very deep-rooted hypocrisy, and this is also with the level of freedom and the rights that we should have. When we talk about Islam, when we talk about Islamic, there was a time that as powerful a person as Umar ibn al-Khattab, he could be stopped during khutbah and asked about his accountability, that how did he get his length of dress that otherwise most of the people did not have. That we could ask for accountability. Unfortunately, for a very long time in the history of Muslims, that accountability has been taken away. And that needs to be restored. And that is why when we talk about good governance, from Islamic perspective, we do have models. We do have examples in terms of the values and norms. Again, we as people, to be empowered, we must insist on those rights.
Well, I can accept your ideas, yes, but in our dictionary as Muslims, I'm not seeing the whatsoever good governance, transparency, responsibility, and so on. And
it is not there, right?
No, it's not there.
It is not there.
It's not there. We are the best talkers, but we are not believers. We are not doing it right, even though that we have some magnificent ideas, some magnificent brains like yourself, and so on. But still, I think we are not doing it according to the right way. Anyway, the idea that I have in mind, and this is the final thing, unless you elaborate a little bit. Sir, we are, as Kuwaitis and the people in the Gulf, are investing a lot outside Kuwait. And we are making a hell of a good money. And while we are doing it, we are paying tax also. There is a system called the Charity Act that we can ask to return some of our own tax for the non-profit organizations. The idea is, why, as Muslims, why don't we think of a charity made by the countries who are investing outside and paying tax? We can return part of our own tax, maybe 40%, according to the Charity Act. And while we can return it back, we can divide it into the societies that we live in, and to the Muslims and the Arab world and non-profit organizations, and the some organizations like USAID, Canadian, Oxfam, Amnesty International, Middle East Watch, and so on. I'm not sure why, even though that it is by the law, we can do something like this, and we can support our own Islamic financing system, and we can, what's so called, turbocharge our own performance, and resilience. Why don't we do something like this? Why, even though that it is written and it is obvious and in front of everybody, but we are not doing it?
As I have mentioned before, that how do we develop, how do we solve our problem is not a mystery. We have enough ability and talent and God-given gift that we can solve the problem. My personal assessment is that it is the willpower and the vision that is lacking, and as such, we are distracted in doing things that actually makes us feel that we are all right, and why bother about all these major or fundamental changes. So once we have the will, and as the collective will matures and galvanizes into something substantive, inshallah, I do have the hope and confidence that things will begin to change.
Inshallah. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
You are
Thank
most
you.
welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brother Nasir, and also thank you, Prof. Now, I think there is a sister, Sister Maimuna. Please welcome if you have any question. Sister Maimuna, please welcome. Sister Maimuna is with us. Okay, Prof. There is a question, a written question from Athar Shahbaz. What is the relevance of Islamic finance in an untapped markets?
In an untapped market, well, the question actually still needs to be defined a little bit better. The reason is that what do we mean by untapped market? There are still a lot of areas of the Muslim world where we should recognize that wherever Islamic finance, it seems that it hits a ceiling of about 25% of banking population that is interested in Islamic finance. So there is already enough untapped market even where Islamic finance is present. There is a credibility issue. There is also an issue of becoming a little bit more aggressive in educating people. And as I have mentioned, that making Islamic finance a better and compelling value proposition. So if that happens, even non-Muslims will come and do Islamic finance. Even in Malaysia, as it is well known that a lot of non-Muslims actually benefit from Islamic financial institutions because they find it a better value or something. In terms of untapped market, if it means that there are areas of the Muslim world or even non-Muslim world where Islamic finance has not reached, it can be presented as an alternative, but our real challenge is again to make it such a value proposition that people would be coming to it not just to go to heaven, but actually that it is a better value in this world. It actually offers a better risk-adjusted risk return package compared to others. And more importantly, if the common people can find that this is relevant to their life, it is not just for banking need, but actually it is interfaced with their aspiration and challenges of life. So people will come. Unfortunately, right now under dual banking system, we're simply trying to be as good and as well performing as the conventional counterpart. And this kind of satisfaction or gratification that somehow this is the best we can do is limiting the potential of what we can do. So untapped market, yes. The thing is that there are many places where, as you know, that even the conventional banks that offer Islamic banking as a service, you know that they offer that only in the Muslim world. They do not find anything that are compelling enough that they would like to introduce in their home. So HSBC is not offering that in their home country in such a way that, look, here is Islamic finance. It is something better for you and come and get it. They don't do it that way. They just try to tap the Muslim community in different countries to offer these services. I believe that if it is properly restructured and properly set, Islamic finance can offer a better value proposition, a more compelling value proposition, so that people will come and not just embrace it, they would seek it, because people go after value. Just look at different places of the shops where they find value, they just run toward it. They want to get that. And Islamic finance, when it would prove its value, then you will see that crowd would be coming. And it doesn't have to be limited to only those who are looking for Sharia compliance and a halal stamp on these products without understanding how it relates to their life, without understanding how these things work, without understanding the risk profile of these projects. They just blindly embracing it, that this is what they need, or this is what they have, or this is what they should have. Once that level is achieved, that we understand what is being offered and how it can be improved and it can be broadened to help achieve our aspirations, I believe that a lot more untapped market could be tapped, both currently in the Muslim world and elsewhere.
Thank you, Prof. Before we end the session, I would like to invite participants to our Ramadan, Multaqa Ramadani, a Ramadan series, which normally will be started on 28th of this month, inshallah. Ramadan series will be started, inshallah, on 28th of this month. So I would like to invite all the participants to join, and you may visit Nadal Iqtisad al-Islami page or groups, WhatsApp groups, and also Facebook page as well. So the prize money will be 7,000 US dollar for the winner. So I would like to invite all the participants to join and to follow the programs and events of Nadal Iqtisad al-Islami. So we would like to thank all the participants for joining us in this special webinar. And
if I can just have 1 minute.
Yes, Prof. Before we conclude, yes, the last words is for you, inshallah. Please welcome, Prof.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank again the host of this webinar, and particularly you, Dr. Mahi, to facilitate it. I also would like to express my appreciation of those people who asked questions and had some curiosities. Actually, I can be easily reached by email, as well as most of my papers are archived at SSRN, where Social Science Research Network archive. So any of you who would like to have the presentation either can get a copy from Dr. Mahiuddin, or you can contact me directly. But last thing that I want to say is that Allah has given us a lot of blessings in terms of our talent, in terms of our thinking ability, in terms of our solving our problem. We should not compromise in this regard. We can do better things. We can do more things. We can solve more problems, but we have to be problem solving oriented. We have to be goal oriented. We have to identify and set proper goals. Once we embrace these perspectives, a lot of things would be assessed differently. Not necessarily that we will be less appreciating what has been done, but actually we will be utilizing what we already have, what has already been achieved, and then move on to do something better. So with that message, inshallah, I look forward to, inshallah, connecting with you in a different context at different time. I make dua for you before this Ramadan, and please remember also me and my dear ones in your dua. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you, Prof. And on behalf of Nadal Iqtisad al-Islam Jamiat al-Kuwait, Islamic Economics Association, University of Kuwait, we would like to thank you very much for your time, for your efforts, and for your wonderful presentation of your thoughts and philosophy. May Allah bless you, Prof. And we would like to thank also Nadal Iqtisad al-Islami and Dr. Ala, who is the Director General of Nadal Iqtisad al-Islami, all the members and all participants, students. May Allah bless you all. May Allah reward you all. With that, we conclude today's session here. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.